Okay, greetings and welcome to Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. Today's date is the 24th of March, 2024. I'm brother Dr. Toyin in the studio. I say the studio, we're actually not at the studio. We're actually not even at home or in London. So it's going to be a bit strange. We're using different equipment, my notes in different places, but please bear with us. I'm in the studio with Sister Oleander. Let's double check. Hopefully you can see us both okay. If you can, you know the usual deal. We should be streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. So let us know that you can see us okay. Give us a quick wave, hi, comment, whatever. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you want to support us as well. We're going to go over a review of community-related news over the last past fortnight. Sister Oleander, do you want to say anything? Just to give a check with your mic.
Yep. Greetings, everybody. I hope you can see and hear us okay.
Yep. Likewise, we're going to just run live as if you can. But as usual, please, your comments, sound checks, as ever, are always useful. Now, this is a very jammed program. They seem to always be that way. So I'm going to really try and whiz through at pace, not to diminish the importance of any of the stories, but just to kind of make sure that we get this done certainly under 2 hours. We've been getting longer and longer, and we're trying to go the other direction. But either way, we're going to, as usual, start with libations to those that have recently passed or note any anniversaries in our history. So I'm going to start with the news of the passing of our elder, Reginald Dumas. Now, our elder was a retired head of public service. He was a diplomat and newsday columnist. He passed after days of surgery. I think it was a gastrointestinal intestinal thing. He was 88 when he joined the Ancestors. He was very well loved for his amazing work for our people in the Caribbean. His legacy is one that calls for all of us to do better when we see problems and not just sit back and allow everything to fall to pieces. He was very famous for this kind of like, we need to get up and do stuff. Just so you know a bit about his background, he was appointed special advisor to the late United Nations Secretary General, that's our brother Kofi Annan. And that was after, you may remember, the major earthquake which ravaged Haiti many years ago. Now, what our elder Dumas did was that he raised personal funds to restore at least 3 schools. He built another school and restored 2 others that were damaged by that earthquake. So, like I said, he's now joined the Ancestors, and that call, that legacy that we should all do better when we see problems and not just sit back and just shrug our shoulders is one that we definitely will respect. May the Ancestors be pleased with your work. Now, the next libation is to our Mama Mary Adewa Bonsu. Now, Mama Bonsu's son is probably known to us as the famous Henry, so-called Too Intellectual by the BBC, Bonsu. And you may remember that Henry Bonsu, who you still see on radio stations and TV programs dealing with current affairs. And Kofi Kuster set up Colourful Radio. Now, you've got to remember Colourful Radio. Nowadays, we have so many channels, podcasts going on. But when Colourful Radio was set up, it was the first ever British African-led radio station that focused specifically on speech instead of music. And it was responding to demand that people have been crying out for many, many years. Even now, it's still there. If you tune into a lot of our community radio stations, there's still far too many that focus only on music and don't really bring the news, which is really what Colourful did. Now, his mother passed away just a month ago, essentially. She was buried not too long ago. And one of the quotes that Henry always used to say about his parents was that they taught him that the pen was mightier than the sword. So we remember Mama Adewa Bonsu for her works and for inspiring the young Henry to be such an amazing asset and amazing contributor to our community. May the Ancestors be pleased with her works. The next libation is we remember Neil Flanagan. He's an elder, passed away during the Ancestors, just short of 100. He made it to 99. Now, for some of you who are familiar with the history of Windrush, he was the 99th, no, not the 99th, he was the 39th person from Jamaica to come and volunteer for the RAF. Following his military career, he settled down and he kept on working. He gets very busy in retirement, actually. Way into his 90s, he would continue to go to schools on a regular basis and colleges as part of a mentoring program that he worked with. There's a charity called Urban Synergy. And this is what I really loved about our elder Flanagan, was that what he did with this program was that he helped young people between the ages of 11 and 18 unlock their full potential. And he did that by really showing them different options and opportunities that are available for them within the education system. So things like work experience and other kind of like schemes that prepared them for the employment market, so they could become entrepreneurs, they could do jobs, all these kind of things. So he joined the ancestors, and many people in our community have wonderful things to say about what he did and his contributions. I also want to make another libation, which this is unusual, but something I just found out like an hour ago. We also want to remember Joyce Cynthia Collins, who joined the ancestors at the age of 89, as she's the mother of our brother Tony Seeley. Now, I don't have an image of her. Well, the only image I had was her in the hospital bed, and I didn't want to use that one. But our brother Tony Seeley, you may know for his activist works in South London, but his mother had been ill for a little while, and she finally joined the ancestors. Like I said, literally a few days ago. We remember. Now, the next libation is from 99 to the tragic age of 19. And this is our sister Samaria Ayanle. My apologies for the pronunciation. Now, she was in her first year studying Japanese and the history of art at SOAS University when she first vanished. And what happened was that she went missing, no one could find her. And then she was seen in the early hours on the 22nd of February. And this date's quite important to check. So the 22nd of February was the last time she was seen. But tragically, her body was found in the water near Putney Pier the same day. The Metropolitan Police that they only launched a probe into disappearance on the 8th of March, after she's reported as missing by SOAS, which is the university she went to. So there's this gap between them actually investigating her passing and people making an announcement saying that, look, her body's been seen, do something about it. Now, her death is being treated as unexplained, and there's going to be further inquiries that the police are conducting to find out. But I know that the family are quite distressed, quite upset. Her colleagues, her students are all talking about the loss of this young sister. And so, we'll keep an eye on this particular story. That gap between February and March, it's almost like a 2-week gap. What was the police doing to find out what had happened? Why wouldn't they engage straight away with her? I don't know those answers to those questions. This is something that's still fresh, but we remember. Now, this one you had probably heard on all the mainstream newspapers. This is the tragic loss of our uncle, Richard Taylor, who joined the ancestors at the age of 75. Now, of course, Richard Taylor is the father of the young Damilola Taylor, who was murdered in 2000 at the age of 10. I don't know if you know his background, but Richard Taylor was a former Nigerian civil servant. He was dedicated years to improving the lives of disadvantaged children, especially in the wake of his son's passing. He set up the Damilola Taylor Trust, which campaigned against knife crime, and he also raised funds for children to help those who are aspiring to become doctors like Damilola Taylor was. I think even his Damilola's mother passed away quite shortly after death. Many of us in the community recognize it, that it's potentially a broken heart. Now, for those of you who don't recall, and I do, and it was quite a scarring moment in our community. Damilola was left bleeding basically to death in a stairwell in Peckham, London, after he was attacked and slashed with a broken bottle on his way home from a library. There was 3 Crown Court trials, and eventually his 2 killers, which were brothers Ricky and Danny Preddy, were finally jailed. So we've just lost our uncle. Henry Bonsu, who I just spoke about, who just lost his mother, actually put a quote out online, and he says that Richard Taylor was a wonderful gentleman who didn't seek the life of a campaigner. It was thrust upon him when his son Damilola was so brutally murdered. yet another uncle taken away by prostate cancer. Brothers, the earlier it's detected, the better the chance that we have to survive it. So, I mean, this is um, tragic news. And like I said, you might have heard this already, but we remember the work of Richard Taylor, um, who dealt with such an amazing amount of loss and still came back and gave to our community. We remember. The next tragic story, I mentioned one of someone who was 19, our sister at SOAS. Now, this is a young prince who's 17. This was last year, actually. Actually, it's a year ago to this day almost. Rohan Shand, who's otherwise known as Fred, was stabbed to death outside the Cock Hotel in Northampton. Now, a 16-year-old boy who was 14 at the time of the attack was found guilty of murder, and a second boy, who's now aged 18, was acquitted of murder and manslaughter but admitted possession of a knife and was also sentenced to 18-month community rehabilitation order. Now, this was a horrific story. I think it was something like 7 seconds until for him to die. There's lots of CCTV footage around because it happened kind of like in a public street. It was all over a feud that began a couple of days earlier between different friendship groups from different schools. I think our young brother was, kind of like involved at a McDonald's scene. They were harassing some young girl. There was a little scuff that broke out, and then I think he pushed one of the boys that was kind of like involved. The boy got a nosebleed, and they kind of like went on to, was it Snapchat? I think it was. Yeah, it was Snapchat. They started planning to come and get at him. Now they say in the trial that when they decided to take the knife, they didn't think they'll ever use it. They tried to get more of them, but only 2 of them went in the end. And then they saw him and the young boy murdered him by stabbing him in the chest. Once, I think it was just one stab wound. I think they say it was like 7 seconds for him to lose his life. There's footage of his father on ITV news website. It's quite sad and tragic to watch it. He doesn't want anyone to forget his son. He doesn't want anyone to forget how easy this can happen, and that when young boys are running around the street carrying knives, this is always a potential what can happen. You might think you're going to go out and just rough someone up, but this can always happen. And so we remember Rohan Shand. And then talking about young people, what do we say? Lest we forget the young people who were massacred in the Sharpeville attack by the apartheid police in 1960. And this is when the regime in Tanzania murdered and killed 69 people and injured many, many other protesters who were marching peacefully against the discriminatory pass laws that the then regime had enacted. Now, we have to remember this because we literally are on the anniversary again, just a few days out. And it's young people, again, who are focused on this. Now, the government of South Africa has actually also commemorated this event. But I want to leave you with a quote from the then Secretary General of the Pan-Africanist Congress, Tanzania, Apa Poe. He says that the Sharpeville massacre was a turning point in the history of the liberation of Tanzania. It was a result of Sharpeville Day. It was as a result of Sharpeville Day that they saw many political parties banned. We saw leaders sent to prison, all resulting in the United Nations having to sit and declare apartheid as a crime against humanity. Now, I said it, actually he was the general then. Actually, no, he's the general now, my mistake. But that's right, the Sharpeville massacre had massive impact. And those almost 70 people who were murdered by the state and 100 others who were injured led to change. And of course, I say this in the aftermath of what many of us are witnessing taking place in Gaza, in Palestine right now, and the slaughter of thousands of children, while many in the world are turning a blind eye as the people are starting to say, no, not in our name. Okay, and lest we forget, this one's always a bit strange for me to talk about, but 17 years ago, the Pan-African resistance to the Wilberfest took place, and it reached a dramatic conclusion in 2007 when the government attempted to host a ritual to celebrate its accomplishments, and it was stopped by the efforts of a Pan-African community based in London. What I want to say is that we organised to liberate the minds of millions of African people around the world, not just in the UK, who were being miseducated into believing that the British were anti-slavery abolitionists, that's the term that they like to use, rather than the chief architects, pirates and bandits in the history of the Ma'afa. This is especially during its enslavement and colonial guises. They continue to do so now. So lest we forget, when we come together, we organise in a united manner, there's nothing that we can't achieve. The government at the time, the British government, spent £20 million trying to brainwash, trying to indoctrinate us into its false narrative. I think, as Bob Marley says, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. And the final libation for this section is actually, I decided to turn it around. Actually, it's in memorial, and actually it's just a reminder that the amazing Ama Ata Adu and Walter Rodney would have turned 82 years old today. Now, they're both ancestors. Ama Ata Adu passing away last year this time, or in May actually, 2023. She was a Ghanaian author, a poet, a playwright, a politician, and an academic. Accomplishments as Secretary for Education in Ghana was amazing. Her first play, The Dilemma of a Ghost, was published in 1965, which made her one of the first published female African dramatists, while Walter Anthony Rodney was a Guyanese historian, a political activist, and an academic. His notable works included the almost peerless How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, which was published in 1972. Tragically, our hero, the Pan-Africanist, was assassinated in Georgetown, Guyana in 1980. But their legacy for both of them continues to live on, not only in the conferences that we organise in their names, but in their amazing works, which still continue to educate, liberate, and inspire a next generation. That's it for the libations for this section. Sister Oleander, sorry. I think I just saw you come on the screen. Shall I do that? There we go.
Yes, I did. Sorry. I've got 3 comments here. So first one is from N, Grand Rising All Africans 100. Special greetings to you, Brother Toyin and Sister Oleander. Much love, family. Much love to you too.
Give thanks.
Yeah. And the next one is from Mr. The 43. Good evening, Dr. Toyin. Hope all is well.
It is. It is. It's nice to be out of the belly of the beast in London. So yeah, that's cool. You can't see the ocean behind me, but we're you know, it's a nice place, nice energy where we are at the moment, even if it's just for a couple of days.
Yeah. And then we have Learn to Dig 2 Pits, sends peace.
Learn to dig 2 pits is a very, very, very important proverb, that one. Give thanks and peace to you as well. Well, it's good to know you're with us. I'm assuming that means that you can hear and see us okay. There might be a few technical gremlins because we're not in our usual space, but just as a reminder, you are watching Nigeli's Pan-African Community News Update. If you are watching live, this is not a recording, then you're welcome to interact with us just as our other friends just did through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. And please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you find this broadcast useful or you just want to support us. Anyway, the next section looks at general domestic news affecting our community in the UK. This is not going to be a nice segment, but it's the news. So I'm going to start off with a story that's been circulating on social media for the last week, and this is of an African student who was beaten up during they say an alleged racist incident in Carlisle, but he was a racist incident from what we're finding out now. He has been bullied at school since moving to the UK. He only arrived 3 months ago, and since that bullying, since he arrived, he's been bullied. In the video that's been shared on social media, and I'm going to say, please, if you see the video, please don't share it, because it has his face and it's not, he can be identified. He's a child, and we need to kind of look after him. Anyway, it's been shared widely on social media. He was surrounded, assaulted, and ordered to kiss the shoes of a European boy before the boy went and then punched him in the stomach afterwards. Now, it's a horrific video to see, and it will anger you. So if you're going to watch it, please be prepared for that. It's quite triggering. The police have arrested 4 boys in their early teens. I wanted to find out what their ages were. We haven't got that detail yet. And the police have said that they're going to increase, or not they're going to, that they have increased patrols to make sure the area stays relatively safe. Now, what makes this a particularly heinous crime, on top of the fact it's just bullying of a child because he's an African child and because he's just come to the UK, was that, and this is something we've learned from the mother, was that the attack was actually also witnessed by the boy's 11-year-old sister, and now they're both just traumatized. Now, she has confirmed the police are looking at a suspected hate crime. And I say that because I looked at statistics of the crime, of hate crime in that area, and racially motivated hate crimes have shot through the roof in that particular area. So the police are thankfully taking it serious. But yeah, there's not much more I can say about this until we get more information. It's not just the children who were involved in the assault that I think are responsible. I actually think that we have to look a bit deeper into what's going on in that community, because there's a problem in that community. I don't know whether it extends to the school, but this is a serious issue. Like I said, distressing. I'm going to move to the next story. Now, this one is something I saw on the BBC. This is, we don't have details of the child or the parent, but essentially a mother has accused a secondary school of not taking racism claims seriously enough after her son was subject to name calling and bullying. Now, the mother has said that her 12-year-old child was repeatedly called racist slurs at school in southern England. I don't know where about it is. Like I said, it's something on the BBC. When children are this young, often the details are removed to protect them, given some anonymity so that they can't be identified and harassed. Because this is the sick world we live in, right? That even 12-year-olds, if their names are released, and then the racist trolls will come after them and try to traumatize them even further. Now, the mother said that the incidents were either not acted upon when she made complaints to the school, or the punishments that were given to the offending pupils were just too lenient. Of course, the school said that all forms of bullying, including racism, were never tolerated. But, they always say this, right? So again, it's difficult for you to follow up on this one because there's limited information. This was just something that was published a week ago on the BBC website. So hopefully we'll learn more. And it's part of the reason why the ACT task force is set up, which is a community child protection or child safety, child safeguarding task force is set up for. Okay, the next story I'm going to share with you again is not going to, well, I'll tell you what it is. We share the news. This is a story of Shannon Grant, who tied up, tortured, and murdered our sister Natasha Moraes before hiding her body underneath a bed. We now know that he's been found guilty of her murder. He's been given a life sentence. But he when the coroners investigated her body and looked into, kind of like what she died from, they found out she'd suffered from 25 injuries in horrific attacks, including burn marks. So it's difficult to tell what what his motivation was, but he really went at her. She was in Leicestershire. This is where this took place. Shannon Grant, that was the name of the murderer, was jailed for a minimum of 34 years. In the court, we heard that he had built a friendship with Natasha after finding out that she'd received inheritance money from her grandmother. That was it. That was the motivation. And just to make things worse, our sister had previously lost her partner, who died in a car crash that she walked away from without injuries. So, I mean, she'd already just experienced trauma and was dealing with that. Obviously, the trauma of losing her grandmother, and then this monster decides to kill her. This stuff goes on. And the last story for this section is one that I struggle with. And this is, I struggle with all of them, but this one in particular. It's a story of Christina Robertson, who was found guilty of the murder of Toyin Robinson. Now, I mean, the backstory for this was that on the 4th of November, the 3-year road, and I did say 3-year road, Toyin, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this name right, Toyin, I'm not sure, but basically sold the bed. The following morning, his mother threw the dirty mattress out of his bedroom window. She was furious. Later that day, she beat him multiple times with a garden cane. She shook him or banged his head so badly that his brain was injured and he passed away. Now, in the past, she had already deliberately and forcibly assaulted him. And one instance that they outlined in the court case was that she had lowered him into a bath of scalding hot water, leaving burns covering 15 to 20% of his body. The doctors who looked at that said something about if he had come in immediately after that, they would have had to put him on morphine. The pain was so bad, but she didn't do that. Even when she had burnt him like that, she went on the internet and found aloe vera and other ways to treat. She didn't take him to hospital to deal with those forms of abuse. And there are other things I'm not going to go through. Now, some of you might be thinking, what about his father? Where's he on the scene? Well, while their son was suffering, his father, the Ghanaian Gabriel Aduapa, 33-year-old, he was oblivious to the cruelty being inflicted by his wife. He was actually away training with the RAF. That was his thing. He wanted to serve the UK. He wanted to kind of like, take that career path. So he had no idea what was going on. So even after she murdered him, there's messages on the phone when she called him, didn't know what to do. In fact, I'm not even going to go into all the details. It's as horrific. It's all online. You can read it for yourself. The guilt, she lied. She told lies and lied after lies. She was part of what they call the Black Hebrew Israelites, and she used that to explain why she had to use the rod to beat him. She used everything to explain away her actions. She denied murder, but the jury didn't believe her, thankfully, and she was convicted. I'm going to leave that there. This story resonates with me personally. So, I mean, I won't share much detail. Some of you will know that I haven't had the best relationship with my own mother, and she was violent to me as a child, and so these cases always get to me. We sometimes are unaware of the trauma that happens. I obviously am still alive, but I do have scars on my body where I was injured, and my father didn't know. And when he found out, he got custody of us and took us away from her. So just to be aware that this happens in our community, and in this case, it's a mother. Sometimes, obviously, it's the father, especially with sexual abuse. But we have to keep our eyes open to these taboo topics that we don't like to talk about. They affect many of us and our subsequent behaviors afterwards. Whew. Okay, you're watching Legality's Pan-African Community News Update. We're live on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Please interact if you feel free. You want to share comments, you want to ask a question, it's your program. Don't forget to subscribe. I keep saying that. Like and share if you want to support the broadcast or you find it useful. The more people that know, we don't promote it. I haven't got time for that. So if you think it'll be useful to someone in my community, please just share it with them and ask them to subscribe or to like it. That way the message goes out. The same way I was talking about Henry Bonsu and Colourful Radio having the first speech-led radio station. We don't have this we don't have a channel anymore. We used to have Ben TV, OBE TV, ACTV. We used to have programs like when Darkers was doing the Devil's Advocate. As much as he was troublemaking with that, there were, Ebony. There were programs for us in a day. Now we have nothing. Now we have nothing to talk about our news. I think we barely have The Voice as a newspaper. So yeah, I mean, that's what this program is designed to fill, that gap. It's kind of like a Jan Sapo for the streaming generation. Anyway, the next section is a review of politics around the UK. Now, this story you're probably all familiar with. Hopefully I won't have to spend too much time on it. Meet Frank Hester. Frank Hester, OBE to be precise, who called for Diane Abbott to be assassinated. Now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with this story. He makes an outrageously racist comment about when he sees and looks at Diane Abbott, he wants to hate all African women. He says black women, but all African women. Now, he's the government's largest donor, and I'm not kidding when I say that. He recently given them £15 million in donations. The government won't return this money, even though they know that he's racist. He has profited from around £135 million of contracts with the Department of Health and Social Care in less than 4 years. So you've got to think that's an amazing investment and return on his investment. He gives the government £15 million and he's profited from £135 million worth of contracts. So the government, like I said, won't give back the money. They'll still continue taking money. Now, what Mr. Hester has done was that he's apologized for being rude to Diane Abbott, but he claims his comments had nothing to do with her gender, had nothing to do with her ethnicity or what he calls the color of her skin. But clearly, this is a racist comment that he made in a private meeting. Now, we do know that the police are about to investigate this to see if he's committed a crime. It's unlikely that he's committed a crime. I suspect that the police investigation is to stop MPs from having to answer questions, because there's been questions after questions. People have been challenged them on this. And so now they can say, well, there's a police investigation, so we can't speak on this until the police investigation is concluded. It works really great for them. But we need to keep the pressure and we need to keep seeing what's going on. Keep this in the limelight. There was a rally outside Hackney Town Hall a week or two ago. It was reasonably well attended. The level of support was amazing for her. There's been a whole realm of madness that's occurred. I mean, there's the story of her standing up and being ignored 46 times in a common debate about the very issue. So she wasn't even given the privilege in the House of Commons to talk about her abuse, to talk about how it made her feel. What happened was what they call the Speaker of the House ignored her, even though he has the privileges and he has the power to actually hear her and to let her make a comment. He just let Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer just fart all over the issue. Now, the Labour Party, for those who don't know, has been accused of hypocrisy because it will not restore the whip. I hate that term, restoring the whip. It feels like something that goes to slave. I hate the term, but basically, I don't know if you remember, Diane Abbott was the whip, as they call it, was withdrawn, which means that she's still a Labour member, but she can't represent the parliamentary party. And so this is their way of saying that she can't, be a Labour member at the next election. So she has to stand as an independent. So people are saying, look, she made a clumsy letter in the Observer. She was talking about a hierarchy of racism, which does exist, but she framed it in a way that wasn't really good. This investigation has taken over a year now. You've actually done investigations of something that's much, much more in depth very quickly. But for some reason with Diane, you are longing it out. Make a decision, either restore the whip or don't, but make a decision. Don't leave her in this limbo. It's actually very cruel. They won't restore the whip. But what they've been doing as this has been unfolding, this misogyny, is that they've also been trying to raise funds off the back of the scandal. So they've been profiteering off her pain. So, you know, straight on the wake of this happening, they were on social media saying, make donations to the Labour Party if you want to see this not happen anymore. If you don't want to see Hester funding the Tory party. They're very hypocritical. This is not the Labour Party that any of us knew. My father, if he was still here, he would not vote for it. Anyway, that's that story. I want to leave that there, completely out of touch. Sister Oleander.
Yeah, so we've got a few comments. N says, we stand with Diane. And Black History Walk says he offered $5,000 for the act.
$5,000. So when you say he offered $5,000 for the act,
that's what.
Are we talking about the other story?
He offered $5,000 for the act.
Okay, brother, can you expand? Sorry, my memory is gone. When you said he offered $5,000, what am I referring to? We'll come back to it. I'll keep moving on, but thank you, and it's good to have you with us. Yes, we do stand with Diane on this. Okay, a piece of good news, if anything. If we want to talk about diversity in the issue, Vaughan Gething was elected as the first, or the new First Minister of Cymru, or Wales, as people like to say, becoming the first African heritage leader of a government in the UK, and I think actually in Europe. Now, the reason why this is significant, I suppose, if you like that kind of stuff, is that he's the son of a Welsh father and a Zambian mother. And he states it's a matter of pride for a modern Wales. Now, he's for the Labour Party in Wales. But what he represents, I suppose, in many ways, is the fact that now the UK's 4 governments have leaders from minority ethnic communities. So if you think about Gething in Wales, if you think about Rishi Sunak, who has Indian heritage in the UK, you think about Hamza Yusuf, the First Minister, to be born, who was born to a Pakistani family in the UK. So again, so we have this strange, and I've forgotten his name. I always get it wrong. He's just resigned, actually. The one in the Republic of Ireland. So it's not quite the UK because they're outside. My brain's gone. I just read the news the other day that he's resigned. That's going to really irritate me. He's Pakistani. He's dual heritage Pakistani, and oh, it's just gone. I can see his face, and it's gone. But yeah, and also in Northern Ireland, we have, it's not, in this case, it's not actually someone who's of a minority ethnic community, but it's someone who's a member of Sinn Féin. So there's been a transformation of the political landscape. That's really irritating. I can see his face and I can't remember his name. And in the Republic of Ireland, he's just resigned anyway. He's the first, it'll come back to me. Anyway, so this is just a story about politics. I would talk about the illusion of inclusion, but that's probably a discussion for another day. And the next story is, well, Doreen Lawrence is losing faith in Keir Starmer and the party leadership as a whole. As basically, this is a continuation of what's happened with Diane Abbott. Now, she's actually, really annoyed that they won't restore the whip to her, but she's also questioning the fact that he's refused to scale back. That he decided to scale back a conference in which they were supposed to unveil plans for a new set of race equality legislation. So what we're seeing with the Labour Party under Keir Starmer is that race equality, anything to do with Afrophobia, anything to do with arms, is actually on a back burner. It's just not given a priority. I could talk more about that, but because there's so many sides to go through, I don't want to go over that. But what our sister Doreen Lawrence, or elder, I should say, Doreen Lawrence is actually saying is that she's saying that there's gatekeepers around Starmer who are actually actively obstructing her work, and she thinks that he needs to spend more time visiting our communities as well as other minority ethnic communities, and also she wants him to go into churches with African congregations. Now, I don't hold much truck or have any confidence or faith in Keir Starmer, but she is his advisor on issues to do with race. But what I will say, and the picture below the one of story and Starmer is of the man known as Richard Stone, who just joined the ancestors. He passed away aged 86. Now you might be thinking, well, how, what's he doing here? It's like, why is he on? Yeah, I was going to say Jan Sapper, the Pan African Community News Progress. Well, Richard Stone was an amazing man, actually. He played a major role in fighting racism in the UK, breaking down barriers between Jewish and Muslim communities, and also highlighting issues around homelessness. But he's most well known for being a key figure in the Macpherson inquiry, which dealt with the murder of Stephen Lawrence. He since then has exposed violence suffered by African men after being arrested or detained. He even reached out to us at Legally and gave us support and advice behind closed doors. And I really have respect for people like that. He knows it wouldn't be popular, but he did it anyway. He also, what people may not know, he had a long-lasting friendship with the late, our magnificent elder, Frank Critchlow, whose Mangrove restaurant acted as a community centre and was subject to surveillance. We know the case of the Mangrove 9. I mean, so Richard Stone, like I said, he passed away aged 86. And he was also an advisor on the issue of racism to the government at the time. And it seems like Labour just isn't listening. Okay, and the final story for this particular section is what I call the tale.
I have a couple of comments.
Okay.
First one from Keith Hall says Leo Varadkar. I think that's the thing about all
Thank
five
you,
members.
Leo Varadkar.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
He's just announced that he's going to step down from the role. He said it's taken too long. He's been. He thinks someone else should take the reins. But yes, thank you for that. That always does my head in.
Yeah, and
okay. Was that?
No. There's a few more. Then we have Mr. the 4-3 says, I think it's pretty much safe to say that we're at the point where diversity in terms of skin tone in politics isn't enough anymore.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to cover that in a second. I think you're totally right.
Okay, and Keith comes back and says, this Labour Party doesn't care about us. Two recent major female members are proving this.
Yeah. I mean, if we go back to how quickly they've dismissed MPs of African heritage who have stood up and called for a ceasefire and had it been suspended, what they're doing is a purge of anyone who's got an ethical heart, who's courageous. And the government is the same. But we expect that. But that's why this section I want to call mediocre black elite are undermining EDI initiatives, because you may be familiar with the business secretary, Kemi Badenoch. What people don't also know is that she's also in charge of equalities and women's rights. And she said that diversity and inclusion initiatives have been shown to be ineffective and counterproductive. And she says, with no sense of irony, as a member hear us. Are we still there? I'm going to keep going. But she says, with no sense of irony, as a member of the MBE, she argues that clumsy diversity drives are no substitute for proper action, as if she's been engaged in proper action. Now, Badenoch, who previously stated that Britain was the best country, black, using her own terms, said that no diversity scheme should come at the expense of so-called white men. This is her own words, right? That we must protect white men at all costs. That's, again, well, she didn't say at all costs, but she said that no diversity scheme should come at their expense. Now, when she said this was the best country in the world to be of African heritage, she's of course referring to Tony Sewell's joke report, the Creed report, which was laughed at, and even co-authors pulled their name from it. Last week, we saw David Lammy talk about Margaret Thatcher being a visionary, an amazing leader that we should aspire to. I mean, I can't make this stuff up. He's also joined not just with Kemi Badenoch, but also the Kwartengs, the Quasi-Kwartengs, the James Cleverleys of these world, and more recently, sadly, our brother Adi Pitan. And I haven't seen the documentary that this review is actually writing about, but I read the review and it's scathing. And it says that his chilled out approach to entering a so-called whites-only South African town is utterly feeble. Actually, and the author goes at point, his passivity is borderline offensive. Now, I'm not going to watch this, but from what the reviewer is saying, is that he goes into a zone in Tanzania where Africans are not welcome, and he's yes massa, no massa, yes, and he's just so passive, even the camera could get sick of him. And there's something about this mediocre black elite that's taken the reins of so many key decisions, key moments, key levers in our life. And we seem unable to shape them. The Tony Sewells, the Sean Baileys, the Kemi Badenochs. If I go outside Africans, I start talking about the Suella Bravermans, the Priti Patels. I don't even need to go that far, though, because we have enough of them within us. What the so-called black farmer, what's that, Nana Akusa, I think her name is, on GB News. There's so many of this mediocre black elite. They're causing us harm, and they're undermining EDI initiatives. They are the ones who are literally putting the ladder up. So if you think about EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusion, America's having a similar drive. They call it DEI, which is same thing, different way, diversity, equality, inclusion, where they're pulling back, taking funding away from universities, from hospitals. Now the UK is trying to do that, trying to withdraw support for making progressive change, saying that we don't need to do this stuff anymore. I could go on about this, but there's too much to talk about. I just wanted to just put a heads up on there that there is an elite that looks like us that is causing this problem. Okay, just Oleander.
Yes, so we have a comment from Mr. the 4-3, and he says, it really bothers me that the black elite in the UK are mirroring nearly all the faults of the black elite in America.
Yeah, literally they're copying them. And even then, I think Candace Owen, who was one of the chief buffooneries in command, even she has been shunned by the far right, and now she's trying to come back home. So a lot of them, they climb high, they sell us out, but they don't realize, it doesn't matter how far they climb, when they're no longer useful, they kick them to the curb.
Exactly.
And they come running back home. I mean, what was that series about? There was that Dominic Samuels, the one about Black British something, I can't remember. I think our brother was on there. Oh God, I've forgotten the name. It was a BBC series. And we found out that what was happening, that there was these people writing articles about carnival, about how, racist articles, and actually they weren't writing it. They were being ghostwritten. They were being written by Europeans, and they were lending their face to these racist articles in the Mail to disrespect us. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous. Sorry.
Mr. the 4-3 also says, and that's happening in real time as well.
Yeah,
and
it is.
Yeah, and then N says the black bourgeoisie.
Yeah, bougie.
Everybody wants to be. Reparation Nation sends greetings.
Greetings, Reparation Nation. Give thanks, everyone. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next section, and thank you for being with us. Hold on, let me just take a quick sip. Just as a heads up, you're watching the Galley's Pan-African Community News Update. As usual, if you're live, you can join us. You're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Don't forget to subscribe, like. The likes are really cool. It's quite nice when we finish to see a couple of likes on there and stuff as well. Just to let us know what you think, or even a comment. It's always nice to see that, so we can review and find improvements and things that you like, things that you don't like. And if you like this broadcast, you don't forget to share it as well. Just put it in WhatsApp or whatever you use, just to let other people who might find information helpful. Anyway, this next section is a review of Afrophobia and related white supremacy news from around the UK. And of that, there is much. Okay, let's get started. So let's start off with a soft landing. you get the joke there? Soft landing, TUI, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it wasn't that good, but trust me, it gets worse. So the travel company TUI has apologized after offering Dutch tourists a chance to follow in the footsteps of their brave ancestors, that is, violent racists who enslaved people in a former colony or Suriname. Now, the Netherlands actually colonized the South American country. For those who don't know, in the 17th century, they established what they call a plantation economy driven by the labor of enslaved Africans to produce sugar. But the nation gained independence in 1975. And so this comment about, kind of like traveling in the footsteps of your brave ancestors is just kind of like, it's just tone deaf. Now, TUI has apologized, to their credit. They've recognized that that was actually a stupid thing to write, stupid thing to do. And, that's it. There are people now saying, I think it was Gert Wilder, he's one of the far right politicians in the area, who's saying, you shouldn't apologize, retract, apologize. But it doesn't matter, because the King of Netherlands has apologized for Dutch involvement in the enslavement of African people, including places like Suriname. And the Dutch government has also apologized, and not just the monarchy, but also the government, although the government does not support the call for reparations. So just thought I'd give you a heads up on that one, because it's going to get closer to home. So, Oleander.
Yes, so we have a comment from Del Smith and saying, first-class coconuts, Brother Toyin.
First class you couldn't put it better. Coconuts, Bounty, Oreo, the list goes on. Even though there is someone out there who's actually suing people who say those words now. He's actually taken them to court. I think Nels Abbey did a piece, it's on Twitter. He's been covering a story where a young man kind of like got angry with some conservative politician, and he sent them a picture of a raccoon. That's the one, raccoon. And he called the police arrested the man who sent the tweet or the message, and they searched his computer, went to court. I think that, he won the case eventually. But can you imagine being locked up like for hours, being searched and handcuffed because you sent someone an image of a raccoon? I covered this in the last program. So this is what's happening, right? This bourgeoisie, this mediocre black elite, as I'm referring to, these MBEs, they're actually using the mechanisms of law to shut down critique. They're shutting it down. And I think, when I think about that, I think, let's not go off a tangent. That's what's going on. Let me go to the next story. Now, this one, God, the universe has got a sense of humor. Okay, so this one, we're talking about a certain group of people. Tony Sewell, the disgraced Tory peer who chaired Boris Johnson's Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities, claimed that the church has made a political decision to start this fund for reparations. Or they're not using the word reparations, but to kind of like address the past wrong. I'm talking about the Church of England, and he's saying they're just doing it for show, right? He's saying that it's almost like bribery. He's saying we need to have a conversation with the Archbishop of Canterbury and ask what you're doing. This is nonsense. It's like, you should be trying to get more people back in the church. This is like bribery. You shouldn't be paying any money. And we covered this in the last program, where I think the church put like, what was it, 10 million, 100 million, whatever, and then people have said, no, that's just not enough money. But of course, Tony Sewell, sewage, whatever you want to say, is one that's leading against this, as just it's almost like what's that, like clockwork. It's like you can almost predict the outrage that will come from certain actors in the MBE class. Okay, this is quite sad because Sister Oleander.
Yeah, so we have a comment from N saying the coloured aristocracy, black 400, upper 10s are other terms used.
Oh, I've not heard the black aristocracy and upper 10s. I've not heard upper 10s or the 4. Okay, that's cool. I'm going to have to make a glossary of these terms as well. Maybe we should have a program or some kind of session just to discuss what it means and where they come from. But just moving on. So this is a story about Windrush. Unfortunately, there's been a new survey by Liverpool's advocate for Windrush. They called themselves Law, that's the acronym, and they revealed that thousands more people across Merseyside could be owed money as part of the Windrush compensation scheme. Now, I always make the point that the Windrush compensation scheme isn't reparations, it's a compensation scheme. I don't think that anyone who's been affected by Windrush has actually received reparations, because for reparations to be in place, it would mean that the government would have to make addresses, that this could, to make sure this could never happen again. And we're seeing it happen again. We're seeing things like it pushing about these flights to Rwanda. We're seeing the way that it's treating migrants and asylum seekers. So we know that this kind of stuff can happen again. And we know that they're not taking this seriously, because we see how they are prioritizing the post office scandal, the Horizon scandal, who should be getting reparations, who should be receiving compensation. But the fact that we are now knowing that if we thought we knew everyone who, or a good chance that we knew people who were due reparations, now there's thousands more people across Merseyside that could be eligible for this. Now, Law, this group was established last year by the two people you can see in the image. That's Tonika Stevenson and Garrick Prayog. And they're a voluntary organisation, just basically set up to address the injustices caused by the hostile government policies that led to people of African heritage being treated in such a disgusting way. They offer person-centered trauma counselling, free administration services, and expert advice on the actual scheme. Now, we've seen these kind of movements take place across the country. I've seen them certainly in Hackney. I've seen them in our sister. Oh my God, my memory is going today. Our sister Goldsmith, she does the history program, Toyin, and you know her very well, and you've forgotten her name. It's really bad and shameful. She does a Windrush compensation scheme clinic. Oh, that's going to irritate me. She's a historian, Toyin. Okay, it'll come back. And Patrick Vernon, he's also doing that. We know, oh God, it's gone. There are many people doing schemes like this, but it's good to know this has gone afterwards. That is really Kasewa John, Dr. Kasewa John, Goldsmiths, I think first Wednesday of every month, they do a screening and a Windrush drop-in session. So anyone who's affected by it, they can get advice. I think similar things used to happen at Hackney Museum, and there's something similar used to happen inside the BCA, the Black Cultural Archives. I don't know what's going on with my memory right now, but yes. So again, this is good news in the sense that there's an organisation setting out to help our elders. It's awful news that there are thousands more. And for those of you who don't know about the Windrush scandal, I mean, you should know this if you've been on this programme, is that according to the National Archives, there are at least 1,000 people on board the HMT Empire Windrush, which is the name of the ship. 800 of them who gave their last country of residence as somewhere in the Caribbean, although it's important to note that 65 countries are affected, and this is not just a scandal that affects people from the Caribbean, especially just not Africans from the Caribbean. It also affects people in the so-called Commonwealth. I'm going to move on. Okay, this is an ongoing story, and it's interesting to see these. I don't want to say positive developments, because they're not positive, but they're not regressive. And what I mean by that is that we have this situation where the British Museum is again moving in direction and developing long-term loan plans for artifacts which has been stolen or have been plundered. Now, in this particular case, there are statues that are sacred to the Taino community who were wiped out following the arrival of Europeans in the Caribbean during the 15th century. And so the British Museum has some of those artifacts, which are sacred artifacts, and Jamaica is actually planning to claim them from the British Museum following a landmark deal which we discussed about the return of gold to Ghana, to the king in Ghana. Now, it's interesting because the person who's chairing, who's in charge of the British Museum is actually George Osborne, who was a former chancellor. But, it's strange, you find your bedfellows wherever you find them. He's actually in this idea to have discussions for long-term loans to resolve repatriation disputes. My view about whether, someone who's stolen something, you can lend it back to you is another issue. But in this particular case, Jamaica's planning to build a new museum in the former British capital of Port Royal, which will tell the story of colonialism on the island. And it's hoped that the return of this statue will form a key part of the display. So these are, like I said, progressive. I mean, of course, they're still wrong. There should be no loan, but these are progressive stories and developments on a long-running issue. Sticking with the themes of museums, finally, that monstrosity. Oops, sorry, Sister Oleander. Did you want to say something? I can't hear you. I don't know if that's
Sorry, that's a technical error. A comment from Keith Hall saying, "How can you loan back something that you've stolen?" Indeed,
you can't. Exactly, they thieved it, so you can't. But what I come. My position is that you take a win when you can get it, and then when it comes to the turn to return it, then you have another discussion, right? Like virtual printing, this kind of like stuff. Technology is really good. You can reproduce things and give them a replica if you have to, and tell them it's a replica. Don't be dishonest about it, but just tell them no, it's home. You can have the replica, and then if you behave good, then we might lend it to you in the future, like another 100 years time. Well, nah. But moving on from that topic, if you think about another statue, the Edward Colston statue, well, that's actually been placed in a quiet corner of Bristol Museum. Now, this is actually a result of consultation with local people in the area, and I think that's rightly done. Visitors now, if they want to see this ode to the slaver Edward Colston, they've got to make a deliberate choice to see it, because it's based in the Bristol People section of the museum. It's a couple of 100 meters, ironically, from where it hit the water. And that footage, I wish I had the time to put all video footage in this program, because there's a lot of video clips I'd love to share, but then the program would go on for like 4 hours. So people have to see it. They have to make a deliberate act to see it, and they won't actually stumble upon it accidentally. So that's what I quite like about it. For those of you who are wondering, well, why is this a big deal, right? Well, the situation is that this statue actually stood in the city for more than 100 years before it was pulled down by the public. And it was only pulled down during Black Lives Matter protests in response to the murder of George Floyd, or else it would have still stayed there. And people had written complaint petitions. I'd been down to Bristol, being part of a debate about reparations. I mean, lots of people had been trying to get rid of this statue using legitimate ways, and then the public just said, the people just said, no, this is an affront. It's got to go, and they pulled it down and chucked it in the quay, and that was the right place to be. Now it's in the museum. You can't stumble against it accidentally. If you want to go see what an ode to a slavery looks like, you can go see it, or you can view it to see what an ode to people power looks like, and understanding that all these people, all of these kind of like things that are heinous and that are celebrating and glorifying colonialism, glorifying enslavement, glorifying human rights abuses, can actually be toppled. And just as a reminder, according to the museum, Colston played a key role in the forced exploitation and transportation of an estimated, at least they say, 84,000 enslaved Africans, and and that's including children, thousands of whom died during the Middle Passage. So it's right that it was taken down. So why is this relevant in today's world? Well, people have a different approach towards these kind of things. Right now, the British government is engaging in culture wars, and this is leading to the normalization of what I call domestic extremism. I call it that. The police have a unit for domestic extremism. We don't have time to go through that. In fact, Michael Gove just redefined extremism. He gave a definition of it. Something about promoting ideology that disrespects or challenges liberal British democratic values. And the funny thing is, he defined this extremism, but he didn't speak to the people who are affected by extremism. There was no consultation. He just came up with the answer himself. Anyway, in this particular slide, what I want to say very quickly to you all is that you can see the image of the new Nike England kit, where they've actually played around with a St. George's cross to give it a nice colourful lick. And what's happened is that both The leader of the opposition, which is Keir Starmer, and the current Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, have both condemned it. And this is quite extraordinary to have the Prime Minister and the leader of opposition condemn something about an item of clothing. Remember, Nike haven't changed the flag. The flag is still the same. This is just like something on a football kit. And so they're stoking up cultural wars. They're not dealing with the issues that affects you and I day to day. They're just stirring up this division and basically engaging in a normalization of extremism. There was yesterday a Reclaim London rally. I obviously didn't go because it wasn't for people like you and I. It was for those who actually think that England should be white again. That's not my language. That's the language of extremists from back in the day and who have kind of got strange bedfellows in today's political landscape. It was led by these fringe actors like Oleander, like what's that one who lost the thing again, Mukhtar, the actor Lawrence Fox. So their Million Man March to through London to push back and to reclaim the London, retake back the land from all these foreigners that are now leading it. I think around 20 or 30 beer swigging Luddards kind of like gathered up, as you can see in the image. They're telling people to boycott Nike. How dare they mess with our flag? If you look at the picture closely, you'll see that they're still wearing their Nike trainers. So I mean, it's kind of like the kind of stupidity of these people out there. But like, yeah, in the real world, we have people like John Craven. You might remember him from Newsround, if you're depending on your age. More recently, he does a program. Was it Country Files? The name of the program, where he's claimed that there's disturbing evidence of racism in the countryside. So it's not just in the urban spaces; it's all over the land that we have to be mindful of. So I just thought I would share this whole idea that this culture was going to get worse. The stoking of the flames is going to get worse as we move towards a general election, and both party leaders are engaging in it. They're not avoiding it. They're not diffusing it. They're actually stoking the flames themselves. So they love this kind of stuff. That means that we get hurt.
Okay, I've got a few comments. Oh,
okay.
Sorry, you pulled me away. Let me get back.
Let me.
Yeah. Yep. So N just had a little giggle when you were talking about the statue, and Learn to Dig 2 says the fallen statue that exposed the racists.
Yeah.
And then goes on to say St. George was Turkish. These people even steal their icons.
Yeah. I mean, it's strange. Rather than being proud, and kind of like working to reclaim the xenophobia and the jingoism and the abuse, and say, look, we messed up. We were the most virulent racists. Our empire caused the most harm, and what we're going to go do now is actually reach out to the people, who are here because we were there, and actually embrace them and acknowledge them. They still trying to mask it all. They won't let it go. But I am gonna. I'm sorry for having this image on the screen for so long. I don't know if you can see it. In fact, because it's art, right? Or art. Let me explain a little bit about this. So, if you see the picture in the top, this is an image. I say image because I can't use the word art. This is Oleander work. He's standing next to it. He's the artist. It's called The Three Yoruba Brothers. And I mean, I hate it. I think it's akin to Three Gollies, as they used to call them. But it's his work, and it just sold at Sotheby's auction for £31,000. I don't even take a look again. That hideous picture, the Three Yoruba Brothers. I'm a Yoruba man, for those who don't know. Okay, it's outrageous. It's disgusting, and this idea that this is art. Anyway, I just wanted to share that this is stoking the flames of Afrophobia. The image that you can see that's clearly been generated by kind of like AI software, generative AI software, is something that's been shared on social media, which is supposed to be a caricature of African people. And this is still going around, okay, right? So there's this constant idea that we are somehow animalistic, that we are less evolved, that somehow we are the missing link, or there's something subhuman of us. So racists are still using this trope, and yet our brother can sell this image for £31,000 at Sotheby's. I don't like to critique art for art's sake. The image underneath it, the Palais Bourbon, which is where they house the National Assembly in France, uses that image. I don't know if you've seen it, but this is a way to celebrate abolition of slavery or something. It's some madness thing there, right? A couple of weeks ago, I saw this amazing presentation by Mami Fatou, and her full name, Mami Fatou Niang, and it was an amazing presentation. And she campaigned to get rid of this image, and people had attacked her. And she was saying, how can you talk about this image representing abolition of slavery? Don't you see the image? Can't you see what you're doing? And yet it still stands. And so for me, this whole thing about that image, the golly, and yet one of us profiteering of it, this makes me sick, to be honest with you. Anyway, sorry, Sister Oleander.
Yeah, so I've got a few comments. Black History Walk says the above text for 5,000, I think he's talking about, is in relation to Frank Hester. And N says minstrels come to mind.
Yeah.
And then sorry, good.
No, it's okay.
And then Black History Walk says, sorry, seems like half of the message is not appearing for you. Okay, I don't know what that means, but Keith Hall says that's not art, that's selling yourself out.
Yeah, it's very difficult for me, because I've got this thing about I respect the right for anyone to engage in art for art's sake. I'm not one of those people that police what people do. If the man got paid off it, he got paid off it. But it's a caricature, it's a racist caricature, and just because it comes from an African doesn't make it any less racist. The minstrelling. I talked about the mediocre black elite. But there's a lot of us that are suffering from Afrophobia, internalized Afrophobia. It just worries me that this is actually going out there, and people are. The fact that someone's paid £31,000 for it gives it value, and you can bet your bottom dollar now that there'll be other people from our community who'll think, "Wow, if that can sell, I can do even worse," or they'll think better and do more of that nonsense and circulate these racist imagery. So Afrophobia is rising. And while we keep talking about, what's that term, that anti-black racism, that's the term that people are using. We keep using that phrase, and that's so problematic, but I can't have time to explain it. It's Afrophobia. It's really problematic, because it's rooted in a hatred of African people, African heritage, African identity, African culture, and return us back to this regressive, subhuman kind of label. And let me just keep my mouth shut, because that just vexes me so. Okay, now what's the implications of this kind of madness? Well, just so you know that I'm not just saying this stuff. I'm not just some academic nerd just kind of like waxing lyrical because I like to use big words or whatever. Meet the neo-Nazi Kevin Medlock. Now, he said he was upset he did not get to finish the job after he tried to kill Solicitor Tawfiq Hussein. You're thinking, what? Why? How does that link? Well, basically, Kevin Medlock decided to go into a law firm in Harrow. This is during 2020. He was armed with a combat knife, handcuffs, a Confederate and Nazi flags. And he just went into the office and said, "I'm here to kill Tawfiq Hussein." And then he unleashed a torrent of racist abuse. Now, you're thinking, why would he do that for? Had he met him before? No. What it was that the police seized his phone, obviously, when they arrested him and stuff, and they found out that he'd conducted a research, a search and research on the solicitor after he read a newspaper article saying that our brother Hussein was a lawyer who assisted immigrants. That was it. He just read one too many papers, one too many articles in the Sun or the Daily Mail, and he thought, right, I'm gonna find this guy. And so he went, he found him, went down there, started to attack. There was a fight. They scuffed him. The police came, they arrested him and stuff like that. And when the police interviewed him, he said, look, I want to inspire other nationalists to push back against supporters of Black Lives Matter and people who are tearing down our statues. And then he saw this Jewish solicitor who was there, and he goes, Hitler didn't finish the work with you lot. This is what's going on, right? This guy tried to murder someone that he didn't even know, simply because he read in the paper that he's helping immigrants, vulnerable people. This is the reality of Afrophobia. This is the reality of culture war. This is the reality of that mediocre black elite stoking up these flames for their career games. Let me move on. So just as a reminder, you are watching Nigali's Pan-African Community News Update. You're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. In the studio with Sister Oleander, who's got some wonderful things to share with us, I'm sure, as I can see you. Please.
So we have a message from Keith saying there's an exhibition of African art in May called Black Joy from POC, and it's in Hastings.
Oh, I might have to go. I might have to travel to see that. We need joy. We need to see our beauty, to see our love, to see those now. Sorry, thank you. Thank you. I'm tired of the abuse. I'm going to go through policing matters. So I'm tired of the abuse, but you know what's coming up. But just remember, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter to share details of events like was just shared with us just now. If there's positive stories, please let us know. You can share it live with us. You can email later on, but either way, don't forget to share, to subscribe, to like if you think this program's useful or you want to support us. But what I'm going to do quickly, because I said, it's a long program so far, and we're 2/3 of the way through. Yeah, I said 2/3. The next section looks at some policing related issues affecting our community around the UK. Now, meet Mark Rowley, head of the Metropolitan Police, and he's recently been accused of undermining scrutiny of the Met after a leaked memo was found and revealed that there are plans in the Met to allow any officers who are under investigation to continue to work without restrictions. And it's not just that they can continue to work without restrictions, but to also make sure that they're eligible for promotions and commendations. And I think I spoke about this last week. There was a detective who kind of was being promoted. He'd been fired and he'd been brought back and promoted. I can't remember how it works, but this is a continuing saga. And Rowley said that there's a gateway team which is in place within the Met, and they do what he calls a fact checking of any allegations against officers before they are reported to the IOPC. So just to be clear about this, right? You make a complaint about a racist police officer, about a misogynist police officer. So you send it to the IOPC. The IOPC send it back to the police. The police engage their own fact-checking exercise with their little task force, their gateway team. And then if they think, yeah, nah, then that's it, it's dropped. And it's only if they think, can we get away with this? No, we're not going to get away with this. Then they send it on to the IOPC. Now, the reason why this is hopefully that's enough reason for you to be outraged about this, to be kind of like recognize that this shouldn't be going on. But you've got to also remember this comes not too long after the Anguloni's report, which exposed that there are missed opportunities to catch PC Wayne Couzens. Now that's the rapist, the murderer who killed Sarah Everard. And that report showed that there's this damning, this police culture which is toxic, which had it knew that Couzens was a bad one, that he had shown colleagues extreme porn, that he had been reported to police several times for engaging in indecent exposures. There were investigations into him. I think it was Kent Police and the Metropolitan Police, and they weren't satisfactorily followed through. But more importantly so, is that they botched all the routine checks they should have taken to make sure that he was suitable for the role. So this news here that they're actually, while they're saying they've got this race action plan or police action plan to rebuild trust in the community, that they're creating these gateway teams that do independent, I say independent of external scrutiny. The police are checking their own homework before they send the complaints onto the IOPC. And I don't even have faith in the IOPC. So that's what's going on with that particular story. And the reason why this is important is because look at what just happened the other day. I don't know much detail on this story. This came up on Twitter the other day. And this is a story about the police stopping a group of brothers who were just carrying their work tools because they were on their way to a job. They're electricians. And I think one of them had a Sharpie knife when they searched the toolbox. And they just humiliated them on the streets. And we now know, because this happened a few days ago, and I think it was Michael who kind of shared this with us. He says that he's spoken to the man who owns the company that was subjected to this racist stop and search, and the rest is now what they call NFAD, which is no further action. So they put them through all of this. There's now no further action, right? So it's done. They shouldn't have done it in the first place. And in fact, just to make it even worse, it's been reported that the police have now admitted that they stopped them because they were in a nice car. So they saw a couple of brothers, I think it's like 3 or 4 of them actually, from the footage I've seen, that were just on their way to a job. They saw them in this nice car and assumed that they were criminals. They had their tools because they're electricians, and then they took this to the next level and arrested them. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And now that there's no further action means that, again, innocent people are being stopped, searched, humiliated, put in custody. When you go into custody, your life is at risk when it comes to the Metropolitan Police Force. And now we're supposed to just turn the other cheek and pretend everything's all right. And then on top of that, I don't know if you saw the report, but Rowley also, that's the Metropolitan Police Chief, he also recently criticised what he calls armchair commentators who film on duty police officers. So he's saying that they've got a difficult job that we can't imagine. They've got to make split decisions, which people wouldn't normally have to do. And so those people who are kind of like filming them on the streets, they're interfering. They're armchair commentators. They shouldn't actually be doing that. Well, actually, no, we had to continue filming them. They're continuously filming us, but we cannot trust them. I can't stress that enough. It's like when these kind of things happen, any work that's making progress it's like a reset button. So this is like really, really fresh news. I just thought I'd share it with you. Okay, this one is a bit complex. I'll try and break it down without getting too nerdy on you. Now, there's a disputed medical term which has been used by countless of police forces around the world, normally in Western nations, certainly in the UK, definitely in America, to explain what they call deaths in custody, or deaths after police restraint. Now, these two terms are called excited delirium, you might have heard, or acute behavioral disturbance. And they're controversial terms because they're unproven medical conditions which are rooted in pseudoscience. And that means that they're not real. That they're just kind of like buzzwords that people use, and they've been disputed by doctors all over the world, but yet they're routinely being used in Britain to explain deaths after police restraint in custody. Now, you normally hear those terms when officers are describing people who are agitated, who are vexed, or acting in strange ways, sometimes due to mental health illness, sometimes due to drug use, sometimes both. And the symptoms are supposed to be insensitivity to pain, aggression, but the one that's the most problematic is this idea of superhuman strength. That's the one that's, we know about elevated heart rate, which is the other thing that they say happens with these pseudoscientific claims. But it's a superhuman strength because these symptoms, when combined, are ways that police officers justify their use of force, their unreasonable use of force. And police officers kind of like, and emergency services, say the labels are, they often use them interchangeably, but they're a shorthand to identify when they think a person might need medical help and restraint, but that they might also be dangerous. So it's kind of like if you get a call through and someone says, "Hey, look, this is what I suspect is ABD, which is acute behavioural disturbance," then all the officers look at each other and like, okay, right, so we'll bring the heavy stuff. Well, or they say, we're suspecting excited delirium. Oh, okay, we'll make sure we've got like one of our vans and a couple of batons and stuff like that. And it's I can't stress this enough because if you think about well, there's Rocky Bennett. No, not Rocky, but you think about Rashawn Charles. You think about Sean Rigg. I mean, there's so many people that they've used these terms that they've tried to pretend that they had posed a threat because they were superhuman strengths and they were a danger not just to the officers but to the public at large, and then eventually they killed them. What's the Christopher Alder, when they left him on the floor, pulled his pants down making monkey noises. But these are pseudosciences, and the reason I just wanted to explain this and I'm going into more information or detail is because the terms aren't recognized by the World Health Organization. They're actually being condemned as spurious by many activists and campaigners who say that these terms are used to explain away the police role in deaths. And that's important because if you can use these pseudoscientific terms to explain why the police are engaged with excessive force and make it sound like it's reasonable, what happens when a jury hears this, especially in the coroner's court, where the coroner has so much influence over the proceedings? What happens is that no police officer is ever prosecuted for this abuse of power. In fact, I think on the IOPC form, it's actually the first option for officers to tick when they're explaining why they used force. I'd have to get a copy of that form so we can see it. So, this was an important and an interesting article published by The Guardian, which covers this. It hasn't changed anything, but we're increasing awareness about the use of these terms. It reminds me of that drapetomania, which was another pseudoscientific term that was used to explain why enslaved Africans ran away when they were enslaved. And so, they would use it as a reason to lobotomize or to cut off the foots of Africans who ran from enslavement. Drapetomania. Type it up. I mean, this is ridiculous, but this is what happens. Just Oleander.
Yes. So we have a message from Black Lives Matter UK. If anyone has excited delirium, it's the police when they see Black people to target as criminals without any suspicion other than being Black.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think whenever I look at that footage, and I haven't looked at it for a long time because it used to just trigger me, of the murder of Rashawn Charles, I saw a police officer who was hyped. He was so vexed that he had to run and he was out of shape. He didn't try to de-escalate the situation. He just used his whole body weight on a young boy and he murdered him. And then another guy came and murdered him. And they say there was something in his mouth. They said it was drugs, but it wasn't drugs, they found out. It's the police. They get hyped, especially those who carry guns. But even those who are in those the SPG vans, when they go around, what do they call themselves now? The territorial unit. You know what I mean? They're hyped. They're paramilitary groups. Anyway, sorry. That's just Julian.
I was just going to say, when they murdered our young brother in the car, and you heard the police officer saying, sweet as, do you remember?
Yeah. Was that Azelle Rodney? Was it Azelle?
I think it may have been. And that just shows you they were so excited, so happy that he got his target. It's just so disgusting.
Think about John Charles Dominguez. I mean, think about the amount of times they shot him. It's like, even if they say it was mistaken identity, this is what I will never, ever forget. Cressida Dick, who was the gold officer at that time. She got a damehood and all this kind of foolishness. But, she made that call. And what happened was that this young Brazilian was just doing his daily business. Again, another electrician, you know what I mean? And I remember on the news, they're saying that he's got all these wires coming out of his belt. He's jumped over the escalators and stuff like that. All of those were just lies. It's like we've forgotten it all. They were all lies. They ran onto the
Yeah.
tube and they went bang, 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 bang. But I think it's like, is it 11 shots? Was it 7 or 11? They shot him. The first shot, they could have maimed him if they really thought he was a threat. But no, they were so pumped and hyped, they kept on shooting him. And that is the quality. Those officers are still in the Metropolitan Police.
Yeah.
And even
Absolutely.
though, to his credit, Rowley is getting rid of some of them, but they're equally protecting the others with these so-called kind of like fact-finding teams. You know,
Hmm.
it mind boggles, let alone how they feel about us as African people. Anyway, yes. It's a long history, and you know, we need to know more about this. And I worry that next generation, people just can't even believe this stuff happens, and yet it does happen. Let me move on to the next story. So there's this really, really sad news. You probably remember we've been covering the story for the last few programs, and this is basically the tale of young Zilo Mavuvia, who basically fell into the river, and there's been a major operation to find him. He's 2 years of age. You know, he fell into a river in Leicester. The police have actually had more than 200 officers searching for him. I give them credit for that. They've been assisted by specialist search and rescue teams from across the country, and I do believe they've really tried their best. And this is the problem when you have officers who really do care, and their reputation being tarnished by those. And it's not a few bad apples, it's far more than that. But in this particular case, they're now going to scale down the search operation. And I don't know how I'd cope with that as a parent. My heart, I just couldn't cope with it. So you know, he's in the river. They've spent 2,000 hours searching for him. You know, they can't find him. I think they've got to keep searching personally, but somewhere someone has made a decision about money and resources, and it just feels wrong. I understand, it just feels wrong, and you know, I could never be happy with that. The next story, this is a missing person appeal. This is a young queen called Bailey. She's 12 years of age. She went missing around 3 days ago, 20th of March. She was last seen in Binscombe Lane in Farkham. She travelled from London, from what I've read. She's been described as vulnerable. She does not know the area. As you can see from the image, she's of African heritage. She's 5'4" tall. She's slim build with dark hair. And she was wearing a black top, black trousers, and black trainers. And so if anyone has seen her or has any information, please call 999 and contact the police, and you can quote the reference that's on the screen. In fact, what I'll do, I'll make the picture a bit bigger so you can see the details. So I've left the reference at the bottom of the screen so you can actually contact them and hopefully find her safely. So that's Bailey, aged 12. Yeah, thank you. Okay, you are watching Legality's Pan-African Community News Update. This is the health section. This is where we look at some health-related stories related to our community from over the past couple of weeks. Sister Oleander.
Yes, so we have a message from N saying Jacob Blake was shot 7 times in his back after refusing to follow US police instructions.
In his back. So what threat could he pose? See, this is and that's what the aggression is, right? That's got nothing to do with law enforcement. That's got nothing to do with protecting the public or protecting himself or imposing arrest the officer. 7 times in the back is someone being hyped, and that person should be prosecuted. That officer who did that. You know, was it Brianna Gray in her house when they shot through the walls and killed her? I mean, that's in America. We have those horror tales in the UK, unfortunately. Thank you for sharing that. But again, you are watching Pan-African, or again, it's Pan-African Community News Update. I'm going to go through some of the news programs from the last couple of weeks. So the first story is that of bill error that occurred by the NHS by affecting B. Oloko. Now, he moved to the UK in 1979. He's a British citizen, and he's actually an elected member of West Berkshire Council. So he's a councillor. But what happened was that because of his accent and his name, the staff at Royal Berkshire Hospital questioned whether he was a UK resident and actually tried to charge him for his hospital treatment. Now, he said, well, hold on, why are you doing that? I'm a British citizen. He said, well, we need to research whether a person had to be a UK resident to be a councillor. So yes, okay, you might be a councillor, but are you a UK resident? Because, and he was like, well, this is madness. I've paid taxes. And this, it's this thing, it's my right in this country. I've been here for 30 years. And you treat me like this because of my accent, because of my name? This is Afrophobia. This is what it looks like. And no matter how long we're here, no matter how much service, he's a councillor, no matter how much public good you're trying to help, you're never seen quite as legitimate. Terrible story, absolutely terrible. Next story, I don't have much information on this, is that of the two patients, Beverly Sowa, 57, and Enid Heap, 84, who lost their life after eating chicken mayo sandwiches that were contaminated with listeria. Now, this has come out after an inquest into the situation. It was given to them in the hospital. They were fed the sandwiches on successive days while they were at the Manchester Royal Infirmary. This took place in 2019. They both had underlying health problems, but they both died within days of each other. And their deaths were among 7 fatalities, which is part of a nationwide alert over listeria, which occurred, affecting at least 9 people in other hospitals. So I just wanted to raise that news. I'm a lover of the NHS. I think it's an amazing idea, amazing service. But when these kind of errors happen, there's always a risk of people dying. The next story, which is again one about the risk of people dying, this is the final story for this section, is you may remember us talking about this new CRISPR, or the gene splicing therapy on NHS, which was actually going to be applied and given to sickle cell patients. Well, it's been under trial for a little while, and NICE, which is the National Institute for Health and National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, they are the body that ratifies drug usage in the UK. They've actually decided that they're not going to approve this type of gene therapy for use by the NHS. Now, often when these decisions are made, it's normally a finance issue. So we have a drug or treatment that's made by a proprietary firm, it's a proprietary technology, let's say like different kind of drugs like GlaxoSmithKline or whatever. And so they charge a ridiculous amount of money. And so the NHS says, look, we can't give you this medicine, which is like 10 grand a month just to keep you alive. It's too expensive. Literally, they make those kind of calculations. That's not the case in this particular situation. What's happened is that they're saying, NICE are saying that it's not enough data for the NHS to prove it and to fund it. And this obviously has sent shockwaves through the sickle cell community, because this treatment has always been hard to access, this gene therapy treatment, which essentially changes the way the body works. The gene, edits the genes to make sure that the body can produce functioning hemoglobin. And it's normally used in extreme cases when someone's had a stroke or someone, kind of like really at risk of death. I can't say it's a safer alternative than a donor transplant, because we don't have enough evidence for that. But where it has been successful, it's been transformative. And Channel 4 News, I don't know if you saw, you can go onto their website. There was this, they discussed this issue with a sister, Iggy Akumu, who you can see on the right, who actually had a stem cell transplant, which transformed her life. She no longer has the same issue she has with sickle cell. She can live like a normal life without that consistent backdrop of pain. They also discussed the issue with Yasmin Sheikh from the Anti-Nolian charity. So again, this is an issue about people's lives. Like I said, normally it's to do with finance. This particular time, I think it's also to do with not enough funding or not enough research to back it. But that's not a reason to stop it. You'll often hear people talk about or compare the funding made for cancer treatment, the funding made for even thalassemia, not thalassemia, for cystic fibrosis. There are other disorders which receive more funding, but because sickle cell primarily affects people of African heritage in the UK and around the world generally, there's just lack of interest in it. And in the UK, we know there's at least 17,000 people living with sickle cell, at least at the very minimum. Okay. This is Oleander.
Yes, so we have a comment from Black Lives Matter UK saying Lorraine King posted on X on the 22nd of March 24. Bailey has been found. Thank you to everyone who shared this appeal. Love.
Thank you.
Give thanks for that.
Oh, that's excellent. Sorry, that's excellent. Sometimes I don't get a chance to keep up to date with all the stories that are covered online on Twitter and social media. I'm really on Facebook as well, and that's how I found out about our brother Tony Seeley's the passing of his mother. But yeah, thank you for sharing that, and I'm glad she's been found safe. Okay, this is the final section of the program, which we call Being Positive, and there's a few stories, not as many as I'd like, and hopefully you will be the people who will share more of us when we return. Just as a heads up, you are watching Legali's Pan-African Community News Update, and if you're watching live, you can interact just like everyone else has. Keep sharing news as well, or make comments or ask questions. That's always welcome. We should be on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter for you to interact with us. Sister Oleander's in the studio. Don't forget to subscribe. Also, likes are always nice for us. Thank you if you want to do that, and you can share if you think you find the broadcast useful. Want to support us in the other way. Now, this closing section looks at some of the positive news relating to our community over the past couple of weeks and opportunities as well. It's quite short this week, but it's always good to end on or try to end on a positive note. And the first story is over the last few months, we've been doing some programs talking about entrepreneurs in our community and opportunities that have come their way through different funds and finance and training schemes and stuff. I'm not an expert on this particular topic, but I do know where the experts will be, and that's the UK Black Business Entrepreneurs Conference this year. It's going to be welcoming, aspiring, and established entrepreneurs and business owners. It's a place to be if you really want to catch other people and learn from other people who are developing their own businesses. Because as much as I talk about employment, I'm far more interested in self-employment. This year's theme for the conference is going to be Empower, Engage, and Educate, and it's going to include a range of inspirational speakers. I think there's a guy called Dr. Carlton Brown, and there's going to be like a master class, kind of like giving information on business strategy and sustainability and all these kind of things that are needed to help marginalized groups succeed in the UK. What I like about this year's conference is that it's going to operate across 3 of the UK's largest cities. That's London, Birmingham as well. And the launch will take place in Manchester. So, I mean, there's no excuse to miss it if you are interested in these kind of things. The launch is going to be on the 10th of April. And our sister, Nicola Middleton, who's actually been newly appointed as the director of comms for this, she makes the point that there's a fundamental need to emphasize the importance of diversity, viability, and accessibility to the supply chain. And there needs to be more opportunities for ethnic minority groups be able to unleash their potential and develop long-lasting businesses. So, I say this because, I spoke earlier about the mediocre Black elite. They're siphoning off all the funding, all the resources. They're limiting and curtailing opportunities for our young people to become independent, stand on their own 2 feet. So we have to do for ourselves. And I remember back in the day going to many different kinds of conferences and exhibitions that took place, even in education. I think Diane Abbott is really famous for the London Schools and the Black Child Conference. But there was adornment, which was, Margot put on for African beauty. There were so many different kinds of events, Aspire. And we need them. We need to keep going. We need to keep supporting them to learn how to grow, how to do better, and just to network. So I thought that's a good story to share. We also need to kind of feed our soul. And just as a reminder, I'm a little bit biased because I'm a Hackneyite, that there's going to be a blue plaque unveiling for James Baldwin. Now, he's the legendary civil rights activist and amazing author and poet, as he would call himself. There's going to be this plaque done, plaque launched by our brother Nubian Jack. You can tell I'm getting tired. I don't know what to say about Baldwin. There's so much. His first book was it Tell It on the Mountain? I think that's about his relationship with his father. And there's classics like Fire Next Time. If Beale Street Could Talk, I think that was done into a film, wasn't it, recently? And I'm recently reading notes of a native son writing something for an anthology on his anniversary. And so again, it's fascinating. Actually, I just thought notes on good book. Now, if you're thinking, why Hackney? Well, in 1985, Baldwin visited the CLR James Library, as you can see in the image. And this is when the council had declared itself an anti-racist borough. And so 1985 being the year of anti-racism, which occurred after the uprisings in Brixton, of all places, and across the UK, the library was renamed. And so CRJs came down there. And anyway, the point is that it's a good reason for a plaque. It's going to take place on the 17th of May. So please check out websites. I think you'll find it on Black History Walks. You should find it on Nubian Jacks, and check it out. Another good news story. I don't talk much about like media personalities. They call them celebrities. I never liked that term, celebrities, but media personalities. But this was a good news story. This is, I think it's a good news story. This is Idris Elba, and he's got this project, that's taking place in Sierra Leone, and he's partnered with Octopus Energy and someone called Seiska Stevens, and they're going to build Sierra Leone's first wind farm. And the whole idea is to provide this kind of renewable energy as part of what they call the Cherbourg Island City project. Now, it's worth knowing that around 28% of Sierra Leone's population are estimated to have access to electricity, with the rest of the country that's struggling. Now, what the country's now attempting to do is make sure that 85% of them have access to renewable energy by 2030. I sound like an advert because I'm trying to look at the notes and give you the details. But it's a good project. He wants to give back. The island has a population of around 30,000 people in 2013. That's around the size of the Isle of Man. So for me, when I hear about actors and singers and footballers giving back and using their wealth and their influence to help, I always smile, because I'm tired of the drama that we hear from other artists who seem to have nothing but content for us. And the final story for this week is this came up on BBC News, and I thought it was quite an interesting story. And it's a tale of Rose Mankwa, who was once dubbed the fastest woman in Africa. Now, she represented Ghana in her youth and won the silver in the 100 meters at the All Africa Games in Nigeria during 1973. So that was her past. But the story that the BBC was covering was the fact that she's also since then given 50 years of service to the NHS, and now at 72, she's not only the longest serving nurse at London's Central Middlesex Hospital, but she's also retiring from her role. She's been there as a matron, as a theatre matron. She's done other roles, but that's what she's doing now. And I just thought, that's a long time, 72 years of service, amazing legacy, history, winning, gold all those years ago. I just want to say thank you for your service, Auntie. We appreciate you. We appreciate the work, the effort. We know how difficult it must have been. To kind of like, we know what the UK was like when you arrived and what it's like now. And, yeah, thank you. That's it, really. Well, there we go. As ever, I'm going to thank all of you for helping us out. That's Brother Colin for doing research. That's our community journalists. Those on social media who share those stories that I share. Legali supporters, you are community and friends. We have an international audience, I know, so some of you are not even on the UK Isles, but you give us support. We will be back in a month's time. We'll take a break now. We'll be back on the 28th of April, usual time around 7 p.m. We may even see some of you in 3 days' time around noon during our annual ritual on the Belly of the Beast. I'm not going to say too much information. Some of you know where I am every single year, same time. We might see some of you in 3 days' time. I don't know. Normally only there for an hour. Don't really stay for long. Pour libation, have a few words, move on. Can't forget. Sister Oleander, I don't know if you have anything you want to say in closing.
Yes. Well, we've got something from N. Asante Sana for yet another smasher of a well-researched broadcast.
Thank you, Asante Sana.
And another one from Bertram Mohammed. Keep up the good work, brother.
Give thanks.
And from me, yes, we will be there together in a few days' time, as you said. And looking forward to anybody else that can make it. We look forward to seeing you at the next broadcast, which will probably be back in London for.
Yeah, I think we will be.
So everybody, please walk good and stay safe out there. And let's look after each other. Ashe.
Ashe. And as I'll say, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us all. Ashe.
Ashe.